Welcome to Sparking Everyday Discipleship, where we discuss books and resources and how to disciple our children, encouraging and empowering parents to spark important conversations for everyday discipleship every day. I'm your host, Terry Hellard Brown, and we're so glad you've chosen to spend some time with us today. Before I introduce our guest to you today, I want to let you know that this podcast is sponsored by Hyperbole Books. Hyperbole Books exists to bridge the gap between Sunday school lessons and Monday morning life. We believe discipleship happens in the everyday moments, around the breakfast table, during bedtime routines, and in the ordinary rhythms of family life. We publish children's books and family resources that help parents move beyond teaching about God to actually walking with their children in real, lived out faith. From board books that introduce biblical truth to chapter books that wrestle with authentic questions, our books are designed to spark conversations, build biblical foundations, and encourage the next generation to embrace faith as their own. Whether you're a first-time author with a story burning in your heart or an experienced writer looking for a publishing partner who shares your passion for discipleship, Hyperbole Books offers both traditional publishing and comprehensive self-publishing coaching to bring your vision to life. Hyperbole Books publishing stories that disciple families and empower the next generation to live authentic faith. One more quick note, Hyperbole is also sponsoring a wonderful writers retreat for children's book writers and illustrators this August. It is going to be amazing. We are staying in a castle, guys. What is a better place to write for children than in a castle? Come on. So you can check that out at hyperbolebooks.com. We would love to have you join us. Now let's jump into the conversation we have today with our guest, Gaylyn Williams. She has so much that is so good to share with you today. Well, thank you for joining us today. Today, our guest is Gaylyn Williams. Gaylyn, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've interviewed you before, and it was such a blessing to talk about your wonderful book. I'm glad we're having you back on so we can talk about it some more. So for those who missed the first interview, would you just tell us a little bit about your book and your ministry and what you and your father do?
Okay, well, this is just about one of my books. I have 42 books. This one's called All Stressed Up and Everywhere to Go. And it's based on stress management principles that we've taught to well over 50,000 people. It's actually probably closer to 100,000, but I don't like to say that because we train people to train people to train people. So who knows how many it is. My father passed away in 2013. So I've been doing the ministry on my own. I actually run relationship resources, and we offer books and training on our relationships with God, ourselves, and others. The stress kind of fits in with actually, in some ways, all of those topics, but it's dealing with our own stress so that we can be more successful and accomplish all that God has called us to be and do.
That's awesome. I'm so sorry. I didn't remember that your father had passed away. I know you began this ministry with him, right? Am I correct in that? Or the book?
Yeah, we began it together and then we were running two parallel ministries. Yes, but that's fine. You can't remember everything.
Well, thank you. So, on our podcasts, we deal mostly with parents, helping our children to be discipled, and then also dealing with parents who have neurodivergent children and neurotypical children in the same household. Coming from experience, that is stressful because you're trying to discern how best to parent each child who thinks differently. You're trying to think how to share the gospel with children whose understanding of life is different. So there's that tension and that stress. And let's face it, just parenting in general is stressful. Marriage in general can be stressful. What concrete pointers can you give us today that can help us kind of have a taste of what is available in your book?
Well, yes, whether you're a parent or not, just living, there's so much stress. But then you add in parenting and marriage, those add more stress. And you add in children that have some issues, is a lot of stress. So just today, there's so much stress. There was a survey done that showed that people's average stress was 5 out of 10, and 25% said that their stress was between 8 and 10. That is a lot. So it's really important to handle our stress. And a lot of times people will say, well, I don't have time. We don't have time to not handle it, because once we have the skills and the ability to deal with our stress, then we can handle everything better. So, one of the first things that's important for people to understand is more about what stress is and how it affects us. Because a lot of times people think that stress is the stress situation. So, it's my children, or it's the war in Israel, or it's my job. That's part of it, but it's what we bring with us into the situation that impacts the stress situation much more. I wish I could show you a diagram. So, like, there's like a little stress situation, no matter how big it is, it's little compared to a bigger thing that is our internal stress. That's what we bring with us into a new and into every stress situation. So that's things like our expectations, our attitudes, and sore spots. So expectations and attitudes, they can be towards ourselves, towards God, towards others, or towards a situation. But the sore spots are things like our fears and resentment and concerns and bitterness, rejection, guilt, all those kinds of things. So it's really important for us to deal with the junk from our past so that it doesn't hold us back, because all of those make whatever stress situation we go into, those can make the stress seem much bigger. It affects our perspective of the new situation. So let me give you an example. My dad was a counselor, and he was in a country overseas. And one day, two couples came in to see him, one right after the other. They both worked for the same ministry. They both lived on the same street. They both did similar jobs. So the first one came in and said, we are so sad. We have to leave this amazing country. We love it here. We love the people. We love the work. We love everything about it, but we have to leave because her mom is sick. So we have to go back to the United States. So the second couple comes in. Remember, it's all the same circumstances, basically. They came in and said, we are leaving this terrible country. We can't stand it. We don't like the people. We don't like the work. We don't like the living situation. We're leaving. Same exact. I mean, obviously some little differences, but the same basic circumstances, but different perspective. And it was because of what they brought with them into that situation. So it's important for us to learn to understand what is stress and how does it affect us. So, one of the things that I do, both in the book as well as in workshops, is have people write out what are all the different things that are stressing you right now, including all the internal stress. So, there's a whole list of some ideas on things that they can focus on. So, like health, but specifically, if your health is bothering you, or relationships or spiritual struggles. I know when I go through this process, and even though I've been teaching it for over 25 years, I'll still go through this process when I start to feel overstressed. When I go through it, so often the majority of things are internal. So, like, I'm afraid about such and such, or I'm concerned about whatever. It's important for us to understand how stress is affecting us. What is causing us to be stressed? Not just the stress situations, but everything, because you can't begin to work on the stress that's affecting you until you know what's affecting you. So, like if I went into a doctor today and said, "Hey, doc, I'm not feeling well. Can you just give me some medicine?" I don't want to tell you what's going on. I just want to get it fixed. You could imagine how he would react. So it's the same way with stress, though. We have to know how it's affecting us, know what it is and how it affects us.
Several things went through my mind as you were sharing. One of the things was the scripture that says to take every thought captive, because I thought that's where the battle is with me, and my stress is the things I'm worrying about or thinking about, or the what ifs. To bring that under the authority of Christ and bring it back to the truth of scripture helps me to get back to, okay, let's face this situation instead of carrying all the baggage in. But the other thing I was thinking about is how grief plays a part in this. And I think sometimes we have the unresolved grief from situations that, especially as a parent, maybe we feel guilty for having grief about something. I know when our children were born, and we had the first two born with clefts, we had expectations coming into being parents. And then we realized we had years and years and years of surgery, therapy, OT, speech therapy, all these things. And then on top of that, they both were autistic. So lots going on. And it wasn't that I didn't love my children. I love my children. I think they're amazing, but they weren't the kids I was expecting. You unwrap the present and it's a different gift. We don't want to grieve that because we feel guilty that we had these expectations. Yet when I was able to grieve, I was able to be set free and embrace the children I have. How do you see grief coming in to play in what you've learned and what you've been teaching?
Oh, absolutely. Grief really does affect us. And it's important for us to recognize that so many people think, oh, grief is somebody dies. Oh,
Mm.
no, it's so much more than that. It can be unmet expectations. We all expect our children to be whatever normal is.
A little bit perfect.
Yeah, or a lot perfect. Yeah, when things are different than what we expect, that causes grief. Like you said, the what ifs.
Mm.
What if something happens, which can be towards our children, even when they're grown, like mine are grown now, and there's still grief things and the what ifs.
Yeah. I think it gets worse when they're adults because we don't have as much of a guidance. And I'm not going to say control, because do we ever really control them?
We do when they're at home.
Yeah. At least we kind of know more what's going on. But yeah, as they become adults, that can become super stressful. And then you just long for them, you miss them because they've moved away or whatever. And we don't always talk about that. But I think that can also lead to a kind of stress we never expected. So things can blindside us if we're not self aware, if we're not praying, if we're not really being honest with ourselves. I think that's a lot of it, is just being willing to look with real eyes and real truth and seeing what is going on, where the stress is coming from. One of the things that I talk a lot about is the spiraling, and that comes from not admitting whatever and letting it just spiral us down and down. And we get into not just stress, but depression and just feeling incapable of handling anything if we're not careful. And I think it's so freeing if we can assess what's going on and find relief from that first, and then be able to face things head on. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes. It is easy to let stress and situations let us spiral downhill, like you said, totally. So we need to be able to deal with it up front
Yeah.
before we get into that spiral, or learn how to stop that spiral.
Yeah. If I can find the trigger, what triggered the spiral, I can like unwind it and go back and go, okay, this isn't as big a deal as I thought it was. I'm just letting my thoughts take me where they shouldn't. One of the things that we deal with, the mixed needs family, is where we have a child that is just shutting down on us or melting down. Now, the melting down, I think, is a different situation. I had trouble with the shutdown where my child is overwhelmed. You can't reason with them when they're in that shutdown, meltdown mode. But how can we help our children with their stress and anxiety? Because our kids today are really dealing with that, and especially the autistic and ADHD kids are seriously dealing with that. How can we help walk, maybe not a young child, but an older child or a young adult through a process as a parent to help them find some victory?
Yes, that's really important. There's lots of different ways, but just in their language, depending on how old they are, depending on how they are mentally, talk to them about what stress is and ask them what kinds of things are bothering you right now, or whatever the terminology that they need. And it totally depends on their age. So get them to talk about what is impacting them, what are the different things, and just bring up, is this bothering you, because they may not be able to verbalize what's going
Mhm.
on. I mean, even like as adults sometimes we can't verbalize, and it may help. So like when I walk people through this, I give them a list of, here's some ideas, think through these different ideas. The same way with children, get them to think through. And some of this you may have to do on your own, because another step is to figure out, how is it affecting us? And it can affect us physically, emotionally, spiritually. These are like symptoms that we have. So when we get overstressed, each of us has like our favorite symptoms that we develop. And it's important to learn to understand, what are those? So if I get overstressed, and one of my things is that relationships go downhill, then I can use that as a pointer to, oh, when normally my relationships are all okay, I can use that to go, oh, I'm getting overstressed. I need to do something. We can, with our children, help them. Now, they may not be able to tell, but we can, as parents, we can say, okay, he or she is experiencing whatever the symptom is. So it can be physical, like eating disorders can increase it, depression. So as we learn to know our children and what it is that's affecting them, we can say, okay, you're getting overstressed, let's step back, and how can I help you? Each of the chapters in this book has a section on how we can help our children.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome.
It is important to help them where they may not be able to verbalize, but we can see, okay, he's getting stressed because I see such and such in him.
Mhm.
And these symptoms can either be friends or foes. So they're friends if we recognize them and do something about them, whether it's with ourselves or with our children. They become foes if we ignore them and let the stress grow and become more.
I love that so much. I had never thought of it that way, but it's like then we can see them as signposts to help us have victory. That's brilliant. Yes, friends or foes. I love that. So simple. Because what I normally do, if I see it happening, I see the stress starting or whatever, instead of looking at it as, oh, this is a sign we need to do something, I look at it as, oh boy, here we go again. I know what's coming next. It's the shutdown, it's the meltdown. Instead, we can say, look, here's a clue. We can play Blues Clues. No, here's a clue. We can do something about it. So simple. I love that so much.
Yes, yeah, it's important to recognize our own as well as our children's
Yeah,
and even our spouses.
true. True.
Yeah.
Well, tell us, do you do virtual workshops or do you do in person workshops?
Usually it's in person. However, I've started doing virtual ones mainly for people in
Okay.
Israel. But that's not to say that I couldn't for a group here in the US. It's not as ideal, but it does work. I didn't know if it would work. And I thought, well, I'm going to try it. And I started doing this even before the wars started over there, because there's always a lot of stress there. And now there's really a lot of stress.
Yeah, for sure. So, how can people find you, reach out to you, and where can they find your book?
You can go to relationshipresources.org and you can find more information about who I am and relationship resources, as well as find the book. The link will take you to Amazon. So you can get the book in paperback, Kindle, or audio.
Oh,
So
good.
it's available in all of those. And you can also find out more about the workshops and contact me on there.
Awesome. That's great. Audiobooks are becoming super popular, so that's awesome.
I love audiobooks.
Me too. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I can't wait to get your book and give it to my daughter as well. I think she'll really appreciate it too. It just sounds amazing. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Can I just share one more thing?
Of course.
So there's 6 steps that we take people through. The last one is to transform our circumstances by focusing on God. Hebrews 12:2 says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the
Amen.
author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of God." And that fixing our eyes on Jesus, I love the Greek word for that, fixing our eyes. It's one word and it has a dual meaning. It means to look towards, so fixing our eyes on Jesus, but it also means to look away from. So
Mm.
I cannot be focused on Jesus and focused on my pile of problems, whatever they may be, at the same time. So it's changing our focus, getting our focus off of our problems and onto Jesus. One of the most dramatic times in my life was my second son was born with multiple problems. He was in and out of the hospital, mostly in the hospital for the first 3 months. And I was focused on the problem. I mean, I had a pretty big problem. Then, when he was 3 months old, the doctor called us in and said, "There's nothing that we can do." He'd seen 25 pediatric specialists, had 6 surgeries, and she said he has 6 to 12 months left to live.
Oh my
You
God.
would think that at that point I would be discouraged and depressed or whatever. But God flooded me with a joy because now I recognize that the doctors can't heal him, and I've been trusting the doctors, but God could.
Mm.
So during that time, he lived for another 3 months. During those days, I would sing that little song, "Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace." There's so much good truth in that. To turn our eyes on Jesus. It doesn't say that our problems will go away,
Mm-mm.
but they do seem smaller in comparison to who he is. So I would sing that probably 40 or 50 times some days because for the last month, most days I didn't think he was going to make it through the day because he was so blue, even though he was on high levels of oxygen. Yet from focusing on him, God brought joy. It doesn't make sense, and God's ways, they don't make sense. But I do know that focusing on the Lord really helps us, and children to learn to focus on the Lord at an early age when they may get upset about something or feel stressed. How do we help them turn their eyes away from the problem and put them on Jesus?
I love that. That's beautiful. The scripture says that his peace surpasses all understanding. It doesn't make sense. And people act like it's just a Sunday school answer, trust Jesus, trust Jesus. But no, he is alive, he is real. And focusing on him changes everything. It will carry us through. That's just an amazing story. Wow. Well, I'm glad you went ahead and added that. I didn't mean to cut you off too quickly. So that's
Mm.
awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful. Well, anything else you'd like to add before we finish up today?
One thing I forgot to say is when you go to my website, I'm actually in the process of changing the website, but partway down the front page, you can sign up for 52 free stress management tips. And they're short, very short little things that you can do today. So, what is something that you can do today? And you'll get one a week.
Oh,
So,
that's
those are
awesome.
free. Yeah.
Well, we'll have the link in the show notes so people can go directly to that. That's awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for writing this book and for helping us with all we deal with in life. This is really a gift. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you for spending time with us today. If we sparked any questions or you want to share a comment, we would love to hear from you. You can put your comments in the show notes. Below the show notes, we have a place for comments, and we respond to everyone. I want to quickly tell you about one more book. Of course, get Galen's book. I think it was such a blessing to families. But also, we have this book. If you've been questioning whether or not you should homeschool your children or whether you can homeschool your children, this book by Nathan Ritter is such a blessing. It is You Can Homeschool, and it is a practical guide for parents who think they're not qualified. Nathan takes you through some very simple rules, very simple ideas, very simple ways to make homeschool successful for any family that really wants to try homeschooling or step into it wholeheartedly. I highly recommend this book. It is a very practical guide, very helpful, with so many wonderful tools and ideas packed in a very short book. You can read it quite quickly, but it has so much in every part of it. So check that out. You can find that on my website, hyperbolybooks.com, and you can purchase it there for $10. We would love to have you check it out, and you will be blessed. And if you have someone else who's struggling with that question, you could get a copy for them as well. Be sure to check out my website, terryhellardbrown.com, and to check out Galen's websites. They are in the show notes. And remember, Galen is offering those 52 tips for handling stress on her website. So link from our show notes right to there and download that today. God bless you. And I pray that the tips that Gaylyn gave us just bless your life and help you to find the peace of God that surpasses all understanding. But most of all, we pray that you feel empowered, equipped, and encouraged to walk by faith and to embrace everyday discipleship every day with the children in your life.